Blessings, everyone. Welcome back to Gnome Talk, the official podcast of the Church of Gnome. Today we're diving into cults, specifically how they work, why people join them, and what at times makes them hard to spot, even for smart people, thoughtful people, and why here at the Church of Gnome we're doing everything we can to be anti-cult. But first, some updates. If you haven't already watched License to Gnome, One Hat, One Faith, One Ridiculous Journey, go check it out at our website or YouTube after this episode. It's the story of my year-long battle to legalize wearing a gnome hat in your driver's license photo and kind of the journey and purpose of the Church of Gnome in a condensed 8-minute epic documentary. And in the first few seconds, very fitting for this episode, you do see a crowd of people wearing gnome hats, pounding on a table, chanting, "Not a cult, not a cult." Because when you're wearing gnome hats and chanting, it's smart to clear the air that you're not part of a cult. And so, yeah, and also, speaking of hats, countless requests have come in for Church of Gnome hats. I've known from the beginning that, of course, we should have our own gnome hats. It's finally here. Finally, am making custom gnome hats with our emblem on them. And so those are now on the website. And you can get an ordainment package that includes the gnome hat. Pretty freaking sick. Got a bunch new merch. Got some exclusive gnomes. And also, I started a new missionary program where for just about $10 a month, you can get a shipment of 15 mini gnomes like these. And they've got churchofgnome.org engraved on them. And so with these gnomes, you can go around doing kind of what I've done over the last year, in the last year, I've traveled the country and I've spread about 1,000 of them, giving them to strangers who could use a smile, leaving them on tables at a restaurant, hiding them along trails and hikes for people to find. So it's a good way to spread the gnome love and support the Church of Gnome, because we're not a cult, so you should support us. And who else will give you 15 gnomes for about $10 a month? I don't think anyone else will. So, now, as fun as that all is, leads into today's conversation, because behind the laughter, we do actually take something seriously. How do you build a spiritual community that doesn't become manipulative, controlling, or dangerous? Why was one of our founding principles sovereignty of body and mind? And why did I write the doctrine of anti-cult prevention and awareness before just about anything else with this church? Because I don't want the Church of Gnome to ever spiral into something that people fear or use as a tool to control others. And we're growing fast. We've got members in 30 countries and counting. Every day I hear from folks wanting to start local chapters, organize cleanups or meetups, and I love that energy, but I'm also trying to be careful with how do I make that growth safe, respectful, and true to the mission. So today we're going to go deep. We're going to explore cult psychology, how smart people fall into these groups, and how, whether it's a religious movement, a wellness program, a political ideology, there's a fine line between belief and blind devotion. And through it all, we'll remind you probably too many times that we're not a cult. So you don't have to worry about us. We're definitely not a cult. So don't worry about it. Let's get into it. So cults aren't always what you think. When you hear the word cult, what comes to mind? Maybe you picture a group of people in matching robes. Don't mind my robe. You don't need to be wearing a matching one. chanting in a candlelit room. Oh, crap. Don't mind these candles in my room. Or waiting for a spaceship to beam them up. Don't mind all my other videos about trying to make that happen. Anyways, or maybe you think of something like Jonestown or Waco, big tragic headlines that feel distant and extreme. But the reality is, cults aren't always what you think. And they're not always over there. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight in spaces you'd least expect. Sometimes even in places that started with good intentions. They can be self help groups, business networks, MLMs, yoga retreats, online communities, and even more mainstream religions, big and small. And that's the point. Cults don't always walk around announcing themselves with banners that say, "Welcome, please leave your autonomy and your family behind." They usually start off as something good, hopeful. They offer connection, purpose, answers to people's deepest spiritual or emotional questions. And that's what makes them powerful and dangerous. Examples you might know would be, for instance, yesterday I watched a whole documentary on the organization Love Has Won, where it's led by a woman who claimed to literally be the mother god, and she had followers who believed it. And even though she's passed, a lot of them still do. And these are intelligent, thoughtful people who have left their families, their jobs, and their lives behind to follow her because they believed her and believed that they were part of a mission to save humanity. Or Nexium, I think that's what it was pronounced, the NXIVM, where started as a personal development group program. And who doesn't want to be a better, more successful person? They promised empowerment, personal growth, even enlightenment, which there's plenty of groups offering that, at least in a way that's not super culty. A lot of times they grab on to modern beliefs or mainstream regular beliefs. Like, unfortunately, a lot of times the new agey stuff falls into it, but it's not just that. And well, before you knew it, with Nexium, people were getting their leader's name branded on them and all sorts of other gnarly stuff going on. Then there's Jonestown, one of the more famous ones, where the community started out seeming like a progressive, racially integrated movement of social justice. They were building a utopia until it became one of the largest mass murder suicides in history. And now these are some extreme examples, but the tactics, they can show up in more common places. You can find cultish behavior in high pressure sales organizations, fitness movements, conspiracy communities, and yes, even social media influencers who build little digital cults of personality. Now, before you say, "Oh, that kind of sounds like you, Brett," well, maybe I have a bit of a charismatic personality, and maybe I do watch a lot of conspiracy videos or sometimes make conspiracy videos, but we're not a cult. Our website says so. So what makes a cult? It's not just the belief system. You can believe almost anything and still be part of a, fairly healthy community. The line gets crossed when there's control over personal decisions, isolation from outsiders, absolute loyalty to the leader of the group, suppression of questioning or dissent, love bombing on the way in, and fear-based manipulation to keep you there. And kind of where it gets tricky is sometimes you're already in deep before you realize what's happening. The water heats up slowly. You start in a group that makes you feel safe, valued, and seen, and little by little your autonomy starts to erode. "You shouldn't talk to outsiders about this. Only we really understand. You need to give more to prove your loyalty. The world out there doesn't care about you like we do." No, I'm sure some of this could sound familiar to things you've seen and heard. And, also before you say it, yes, in the Church of Gnome, we do sometimes chant, "Not a cult, not a cult," at our gatherings. And yes, we sell hats, and I wrote a whole doctrine explaining how we're definitely not a cult. But listen, if I was going to run a cult, I'd at least make you sell all your stuff and move into a commune by now. So, obviously, that's not what's happening. But in all seriousness, at the Church of Gnome, we're deeply aware of how easy it is for people to fall into controlling systems, especially when they're vulnerable and looking for belonging. That's why sovereignty of body and mind is one of our core Gnomian principles, and that's why I wrote the doctrine of anti-cult prevention and awareness before I even finished the holiday calendar. I want people to be here on their own terms. We're here to help ask questions, not necessarily give all the answers, and nothing to be forced into belief. So, how do cults hook you in? Sometimes it starts out so innocent. If you've ever watched a documentary on a cult or read about one in the news, you probably thought, how did they fall into that? Or I could never get caught up in something like that. But, basically everyone in them have those exact same thoughts. Nobody joins a cult knowing it's a cult, well, at least for the most part. No one shows up one day and hears, "Welcome, please leave all your critical thinking at the door. We'll be controlling your life now." It doesn't really work like that. The hook is human. Cults know exactly what they're offering: hope, belonging. They offer meaning, a community, answers to life's biggest and messiest questions, especially when you're hurting, confused, or in search of something more. It's not because people are foolish, it's because they're human. Now think about it. We all want to belong somewhere. We want purpose. We want people who understand us and see us. And when you're in a vulnerable place after a loss, a big life change, a crisis of faith, that offer can feel like a lifeline. Cults love lifelines. They love people who are searching, and they're really good at pretending to be the answer. It can start small. A lot of times they don't start with anything extreme. It's come to this free seminar, join this meditation group. We're a community that meets every weekend to talk about healing. Here's a group of like-minded people who want to change the world. You show up and everyone's warm, welcoming, and you're love bombed with attention and praise. You're special. You're one of us. We're so glad you found us. And little by little, you feel safer than anywhere else. And that's kind of where the hard line is, because that's all those things aren't necessarily right there a bad thing. Like meditation groups, I'm not saying they're all bad. I'm sure 99% of them are great. And of course, like going to a community where it is kind and warm and welcoming and helps you feel seen, that's healthy. That's kind of what sucks about cults is so many of the early warning signs are real human things that people want, and things that in most cases it's not actually going to turn into something bad, but it's a slow boil. And at first, like as you start participating more, it can be like, come to more meetings, volunteer more time, which that's not necessarily bad, but then it can be, commit financially to the cause. But that's also not necessarily bad, but it all can spiral. And then it can turn into, maybe you shouldn't, that friend or those family members that don't agree. They just, they don't understand. Don't listen to them. They don't understand us. They don't understand you. Trust us. Only we know the truth. That's kind of where it really starts getting sketchy. The group becomes your whole world. Everyone outside it feels distant, And by the time the red flags start to wave, sometimes you're already so deep in it, it's hard to leave. And they know that because isolation breeds dependence. So, at least something I'm trying to not do, is I want people to not be disconnected from their other groups with the Church of Gnome and any future potential local leaders. I don't know what the hell's happening, but I do know connection and community and freedom have to be core things. You should never feel like you need to cut people out of your life because they don't get it. You should never feel pressured into giving more time, more money, more loyalty than what anyone's ever comfortable with. And you should never feel like your life choices have to be run past someone in a group so you can move forward with them. That's all gross stuff. And that's why sovereignty of body and mind is one of our core principles. Because even if you're wearing a gnome hat, laughing at gnome jokes, and joining a global gnome community, you should always feel like you're in control of your life. And also, please still talk to your mom. She might be worried about you. A lot of cults make you cut off your parents, and that's sad. I'm a parent. I would be heartbroken if my kids cut me off because they started following a gnome cult or something. Or not a gnome cult. You know what I mean. Oops. And if I ever tell you that only I have the truth, that's your cue to get the hell out of here. The hook is almost always community, purpose, and love. And those things aren't bad, but when they're used to slowly take away your autonomy, that's when a community, kind of becomes a cult. So why do smart people join cults? That moment in every cult documentary when someone says, these were smart people, doctors, lawyers, engineers, artists, thoughtful, educated folks. How could they believe that? And yet they did, time and time again. So why does this happen? Why do intelligent, rational people end out in groups that from the outside look completely unhinged? And more importantly, how do we make sure that that doesn't happen to us? Intelligence isn't immunity. Here's the first truth bomb, not love bomb. Intelligence doesn't necessarily protect you from manipulation. In fact, sometimes the very things that make people smart maybe can make them susceptible too. Some people are often curious, which is great until someone feeds you answers that seem exciting but untrue. Optimistic problem solvers, they believe they can really fix anything, even when the red flags are waving, or idealistic, the genuine belief that they can be part of making the world better and they're willing to sacrifice for it. That's, great personality traits to have, but a great manipulator loves a brain that can rationalize. They want someone who's skilled at arguing themselves into believing something that doesn't quite make sense. So it's a slow slide into certainty. Cults don't always hand over the whole crazy story on day one. They can start simple. The world is broken. We can fix it. You're special for being here. We found a better way. And who doesn't want to believe that? As the commitment deepens, the beliefs get stranger. But by then, you've invested time, energy, sometimes money, and most critically, identity. You're part of something now. And leaving means admitting that you were wrong. So, cognitive dissonance and commitment, the psychological tension that happens when we hold conflicting beliefs, the deeper you are in it, the harder it is to admit something's wrong because the cost of leaving feels enormous. If I leave, does that mean I was fooled? What happens to all the time and love I gave this group? What will people think of me? And cults know this. They exploit it. They create echo chambers where only one voice you hear, that's like the ones agreeing with you. They isolate you from people who might challenge the narrative. And vulnerability, it's not weakness. And the truth is, everyone is vulnerable sometimes. Loss, grief, spiritual searching, loneliness, all these can leave us open to things that we wouldn't normally consider. That doesn't make anyone foolish, it makes them human. And healthy communities empower you to trust yourself, not hand over trust to someone else. Like, we don't have the answers. We have ideas, we have principles, and we have hats. But the core is always, you are always your own authority. If anyone tells you otherwise, well, whether it's us or anyone else, that's your cue to run. Being smart doesn't always make you safe from manipulation. Staying curious, humble, and connected to multiple communities, that's what keeps you grounded. So, how does the Church of Gnome stay anti-cult? We've covered how cults work their way into people's lives, how they find smart, good-hearted folk offer community and purpose, and slowly erode autonomy under the guise of belonging. But now let's talk about something just as important: how we make sure the Church of Gnome stays the anti-cult. I knew the risks from day one. When I first realized the Church of Gnome had the potential to become something meaningful, a community that could spread across the world, it hit me like a big wave of anxiety and paranoia that I have to build safeguards, not someday, but immediately. Because if history teaches us anything, it's even the purest of intentions can be hijacked. And we've seen movements that started out beautiful, hopeful, and healing only end out becoming something controlling, manipulative, and harmful. So before I wrote most things on the Church of Gnome website, I put two things in place: the Gnomian principle of sovereignty of body and mind, and the doctrine of anti-cult awareness and prevention. They're not just statements, they are cornerstones. So, sovereignty of body and mind, you are the captain of your ship. It's a long title, but the heart of it is kind of, in honoring our own paths, we light the way for others to walk theirs. You are your own authority. No one, not even me in my gnome hat, gets to tell you what to do with your body, your mind, your spirit. We're here to support, not to steer. This principle demands self-awareness. You own your journey. Mutual respect. We honor the autonomy as your autonomy as much as we honor our own. Non-manipulation. We pledge to never control or coerce your choices. And consent and boundaries. They are non-negotiable. We don't elevate dogma over dialogue. We don't prize loyalty over freedom. You're free to walk with us, walk your own path, and still be celebrated. That's why we'll never call, demanding that you sell your house and move into a commune. Although if you happen to own some land and want to start a commune, maybe we should talk, No, never mind. Let's not. Don't do that. Don't tell me that. The doctrine of anti-cult awareness and prevention. Our rule book for not being awful. I wrote this doctrine because I knew it was essential. Anytime a group grows quickly, gets a charismatic leader, yes, I said it, the risk of drifting into dangerous waters increases. So here's what the doctrine of anti-cult awareness and prevention lays out. Some of what we reject: unquestioned loyalty, isolation from family, friends, or broader community, manipulation through fear, guilt, or shame, authoritarian leadership, no my way or the highway here, unless that highway leads to a really cool forest festival, in which case maybe we should all carpool. But what we require is transparency, collaborative decision making, educational tools like this episode of helping people look for signs of cultic behavior in any group, and accountability. We don't just say we're against cults, trying to teach everyone what to look out for and have the power to call it out if something ever feels wrong. So let's get into the, likely eventual future of local chapters. I want to do it, but I want to do it carefully. I get messages almost every day now asking, can I start a local Gnomian chapter? Is there a group in my area? And I want to say yes to people because who doesn't want a global network of groups of people wearing gnome hats, planting gardens, doing local cleanups, and lifting each other up? It's part of what I'm going for, but I'm navigating it slowly because I just cannot fathom a day where local leadership can become a power trip for anyone. So potential safeguards that that maybe we could do would be leaders, needing to go through some sort of training of, hey, don't ever let yourself start doing this, things for them to be self-aware within themselves. Obviously some sort of like contract of like, hey, you're not going to be a little frickin' freak out there. And then for members of any local group, they need to have readily available access to any modern studies. I don't, maybe I should maybe on the website put a section compiling actual studies and research, not just the stuff that I'm saying in this episode, but from the real experts, make it so it's readily available to anyone. So everyone can look out for, not being manipulated. Maybe even rotating leadership positions could help avoid somebody, avoid it getting to their head. Obviously, clear ethical guidelines, regular reviews, so a way for members to report. I think those are all important things. I want to build this, but I want to do it right because it's not about speed. It's about not getting too culty. And so another thing that we're doing at the Church of Gnome is we're keeping humor sacred. Cults are often very serious. They can't laugh at themselves because humor is dangerous when your power depends on being seen as infallible. The Church of Gnome, humor is a shield and a compass. We joke about being not a cult because we know people are watching and we want them to. We want you to ask questions. We want you to laugh at us. I mean, there's gnome hats. Like, we got to be self-aware of what's going on here. And humor keeps us grounded. Humor is a reminder that no one is above being questioned. Even me, unfortunately. But there is kind of a hardline exception here. One blatant culty thing that I have to acknowledge is when it comes to Phantom, the grandpa, my co-leader of the church, and my sweet little 8-pound puppy, nobody denies his requests for belly rubs and treats. That's it, okay? That's probably the most culty thing that I'm not even going to try to stop. So, but I will also give some commitments to you that at the Church of Gnome, you have a space to grow, not be controlled, a community that celebrates your sovereignty, a group that teaches critical thinking, and a shared laugh, because that's what keeps us human. And if we ever forget that, I expect someone to remind me to chill out. But remind me while you're wearing a gnome hat, because I'll listen to you more if you're wearing a gnome hat, maybe. I don't know. Anyways, how to protect yourself. That's a very crucial part of this episode. Talked about cults, what they are, how they hook you in, and why even the smartest among us can fall prey to them. Gone over how I'm trying to make sure the Church of Gnome is working hard to stay the ultimate anti-cult. But we need to go further, because whether you're part of the Church of Gnome, a different spiritual community, or you're just out there navigating life, you need to know how to protect yourself. So you got to know the warning signs. You can't protect yourself if you don't recognize the tactics of manipulation, because they're not always obvious at first. But some of the big red flags are unquestioned loyalty. If someone demands loyalty that supersedes your relationships, your logic, or your well being, run. Isolation from loved ones, they don't understand you, is one thing. Cutting off friends and family members. Healthy communities don't demand you abandon your support system. Us versus them thinking, any group claiming that they have all the answers and everyone else is lost or evil, that's kind of dangerous. The truth, I feel like is most likely pretty nuanced. And suppressing dissent, if you're ever made to feel guilty, shamed, or punished for asking questions, something is wrong there. And authoritarian leadership, leaders should serve, not rule. So, also, you should practice critical thinking, question everything, especially the things that make you feel too comfortable. Does the group encourage diverse ideas? Are you still in control of your choices? Do you feel free to leave at any time without fear or guilt? You are your own guru. You are your own authority. And, even if someone with a cool hat tells you otherwise. We sell gnomes and gnome hats on our website. And yes, you'll look fantastic in them. But if something tells you that or someone tells you that the hat is magical and it will grant you telepathic powers, maybe back away, okay? Just back away, protect your sovereignty. Let's say it together. Sovereignty of body and mind. This isn't just a fancy phrase. We've etched it, into more than an imaginary tablet. It's your birthright. No belief system is worth giving up your autonomy. No group should take away your ability to make decisions for yourself. Even in the Church of Gnome, especially here, your sovereignty comes first. You're not here to serve me. You're here to serve your own self-interest, your own best self, in a community with others doing the same. And another thing to do is stay connected to diverse communities. Cults thrive in isolation. One of the best practices you can have is being in multiple communities. One community could be your family, another, old friends. One could be a spiritual circle, or even, your coworkers who keep inviting you out to trivia night. Having multiple groups that you belong to can help you keep a solid perspective and help you, remember that there's a world outside whatever group you're in. The Church of Gnome, I don't want this to replace your life, just enrich it. And trust your gut. If something feels wrong, weird, off, it probably is. Even if it's wrapped in smiles, community, and good vibes, even if it's wearing a gnome hat, especially then. If you feel like you're being manipulated, pressured, or controlled, listen to that inner warning. You don't owe anyone your loyalty at the cost of your own well-being. And speak up. If you see something wrong, say something. If you feel boundaries are being crossed, raise your hand. If you think things are heading in a dangerous direction, call it out. The Church of Gnome, we want you to question us. We need you to hold us accountable, and we're here to grow together, not to control each other. Even if I ever start referring to myself as the Gnome Messiah or demand that you plant a gnome statue of me in your garden. Somebody should probably stage some sort of intervention, but bring little dog treats because Phantom will probably be there. But also on that note, I have been working on a song under the Gnome King stuff, and there definitely is a line where I call myself the Gnome Messiah, but don't worry, it's a joke. It's, the the context with the song. It's a very psychedelic song about, a mushroom trip and then the gnomes talking to you and then being like, whoa, I'm the Gnome Messiah. The gnomes are talking to me. Okay. So I'm not seriously calling myself the Gnome Messiah, maybe. And I do also think it would be funny to have a gnome. Yeah, that would be a gnome version of myself, like as a gnome on the website. Okay, I might actually do those things. Maybe I need an intervention. Okay, let's move on. Final takeaway. The best way to protect yourself is to stay awake, stay aware, and stay connected to your sovereignty. True spiritual communities should make you freer, not more trapped. It empowers you to be more you, not less, and no belief, no leader, and no group should ever have the power to take that away from you. So, Gnome Blessings, my fellow Gnomians. We just dug kind of deep into the fertile soil of psychology, faith, and how good people can get caught up in things that they never expected. Looked at cults, how they operate, how subtle things can kind of slide into losing your own sovereignty. But the beautiful thing is, it doesn't have to be that way. And at the Church of Gnome, I'm really trying to do everything I can to make sure it never is. This community isn't about handing over your power. It's about owning your power. It's about cultivating curiosity, living with intention, spreading smiles like seeds or little gnomes, and, just maybe wearing a ridiculous hat while you're at it. If you're listening to this, you're already part of that mission. You're part of a community that has, in a year, grown to 30 countries and every day more people joining. Hopefully, not looking to follow, but to walk alongside each other. Not building a cult here. We're building a garden, and in that garden, the most sacred thing is you. Standing tall in your sovereignty, growing freely in the sunlight of connection and joy. So, my final thought is, at the Church of Gnome, we really do say a lot. Not a cult. It's on the merch. It's all over the website. It's basically the catchphrase of our lives. And, behind the humor, there really is something serious there. I really just drill that everywhere because, one, it's funny, it's ironic, because this is such like a ridiculous organization. But I hope that in a way it kind of is a reminder to people to stand for your autonomy, stand for your freedom, and, only join communities that uplift rather than control. So that's what it means to be Gnomian. That's what it means to be you. Sovereign, empowered, joyful, free. So until next time, Gnome blessings to you all. And remember, we're not a cult. Join us.